What's up, moviegoers? Welcome to the Marchio podcast. I'm your host, Anthony. In today's episode of the Marchio podcast, I'm talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. The movie is the second installment in the Nightmare on Elm Street film series and follows the story of Jesse Walsh, a teenager who begins to have recurring nightmares about Freddy Krueger after moving into the former home of Nancy Thompson from the first movie. The movie is directed by Jack Shoulder, written by David Chaskin, and stars Robert Englund as the role of Freddy Krueger. The movie was released November 1st, 1985, has a runtime of 87 minutes, had a budget of $3 million, and it grossed $30 million at the box office. So with the success of the first movie, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the studio New Line Cinema definitely rushed the second movie into production because the movie opened up almost 1 year later to the day of the first movie. So this movie came out a year later after the first movie did in 1984. And, the movie studios wanted to dish out these horror films left and right because of the popularity of them. The movie did receive mixed reviews from critics upon its release, with many comparing it unfavorably to its predecessor. However, it did enjoy later success as a cult classic because critics have reassessed the film's homoerotic theme and subject material, which I will get into. Now, the character of Jesse Walsh, played by Mark Patton, is very underrated. It's very different. He's a struggling teenager having these nightmares, and basically the story is about possession. Freddy Krueger possesses the body of Jesse Walsh, and, crazy, weird things start happening. Now, screenwriter at the time, Leslie Bohem, pitched the producers of an idea using pregnancy and possession as a plot device for the second film, stating a homage to Rosemary's Baby. Even though both films ended up using the spirit possession concept, the pregnancy storyline idea was later eventually used in the sequel, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, which Leslie Bohem would write the script for. Now, Robert Shea, the president of New Line Cinema, offered Wes Craven the chance to direct again, but Wes Craven declined, stating that the script didn't make any sense. And Wes Craven didn't like one scene in particular, is when Freddy Krueger emerges from the main character's body and manifests himself in real life and kills everybody at a pool party. Basically, Wes Craven thought it would diminish Freddy's scare factor, as Robert Englund is not very tall in stature. Now, the intro scene in which Jesse's nightmare of Freddy is driving the bus was carried over from the previous film. Craven was vehemently against Freddy appearing in person as the driver of the car in the epilogue scene, as he felt the storyline for Nancy and Glenn should be self-contained in the first film. Now, basically, the compromise between him and Shea was therefore used to use the idea of Freddy driving the vehicle for the sequel, but not for any characters from Craven's film. So basically, they changed the script, and none of the actors or characters from the first film appeared in this movie at all. Now, in the script, the focus was basically on Jesse for 90% of the film, which then suddenly shifts to Lisa, his girlfriend. So as I stated before, basically it's the homoerotic aspect and subcontext and subtext that this movie has. Basically, it states that Jesse is a repressed homosexual, but it's never said in the movie. Just the way the mannerisms are and the way he looks at certain male characters. Now, as I stated before, the film had a very strong subtext of homoerotic nature and tendencies, and the film's commentators have often remarked on the film's perceived homoerotic theme, stating that Jesse is a repressed homosexual, but it's never said in the movie if he is one or not. They note in particular in certain scenes that where he encounters his gym teacher at a gay bar, and his flight to a male friend's house after he attempts to make out with his girlfriend at a pool party. Now, basically, there's a scene in the movie that would have made the gay subtext more apparent, but Robert Englund changed it. Basically, Freddy Krueger was supposed to put one of his blades in Jesse's mouth and, posture and, do a mannerism of a sexual movement. But then he merely caressed his lips with the knife. In a 2010 interview with Attitude magazine, Robert Englund said, "The second Nightmare on Elm Street is obviously intended as a bisexual-themed film. It was early 80s, pre-AIDS paranoia. Jesse's wrestling with whether to come out or not as his own sexual desires was manifested by Freddy Krueger. And basically that his friend is the object of his affection." This movie does capture certain, homoerotic subtext and gay culture aspects of the 80s. The way things are done were different. The There's not much kills in this movie. You see the character of Jesse being so-called, in his own element. And how Freddy Krueger is played in this movie is more so scarier. The way he emerges from Jesse's body, the way there's a scene where Jesse looks into his mouth and you see Freddy Krueger's eye. And the whole aspect of him coming out of his body was different. It was new. It was weird. It definitely one-upped certain killings from the first movie. However, the character of Freddy Krueger and what Robert Englund captured stayed true. Robert Englund is known as Freddy, and he is Freddy Krueger. And the homoerotic aspect and subtext of this movie is definitely present. You can definitely see it, and you can definitely see that was Jesse. There's a scene where he screams, and it's just actually pretty funny because you don't know if he's screaming in terror or he's crying, but he screams like a girl. So I'm pretty sure the filmmakers left that in for a certain subtext of the homoerotic nature of this movie. Maybe things would have been different if they said Jesse was a homosexual, but back then it was very tough to say because, you couldn't say anything like that in a movie, especially a horror movie or any movie for that nature. But Freddy's Revenge, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is different than your normal sequel. It's very different than the first film. And you can say that this whole movie takes a left turn halfway through. We try and figure out what's happening. And I feel like it's the whole same ending as, the way it started. The beginning starts off with a school bus, the movie ends with a school bus, and it feels like it's a repetitive thing over and over again. This movie is very short, as I stated in the beginning of this episode. It's only 87 minutes long. And for being 87 minutes long, this movie is a quick watch, and as you're watching it, quick things happen right away. It's good, but it's not great. So let me know in the comment section below what you think of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Do you see the homoerotic subtext in it, the homosexuality? And do you think the character of Jesse Walsh was gay? And that, him trying to come out was basically Freddy Krueger using that to manifest himself to others? Let me know in the comment section below about the questions I just asked. And be sure you tune into the next episode of the Marchio podcast where I talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. And be sure you click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell for new videos and new podcast episodes on the Marchio Productions YouTube page. And follow Marchio Productions on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And follow me, Anthony, your host, on Instagram and Twitter at misterfilmstock. And follow the Marchio Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'll leave a link to all the social media accounts in the description box below. You can check it out and follow along. All right, everyone, that does it for today's episode. I'm your host, Anthony. Thanks for tuning in.
You son of a bitch! You killed him!